start off with you, Swin. Can you first talk about your experiences working on oral histories or interviews with members of your own community? What have been the challenges and the opportunities
Yeah,
for you?
I really enjoy the opportunity to able to work with the elders and listening to their stories and overall learning the language itself too, because my Jirai was never really that good in the beginning. So, but it was a really good experience to to learn from the elders because they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experiences that what took them from America, from Vietnam to America. So it was quite a journey. So it was enlightening overall. Yeah.
Can you just briefly mention what types of projects you worked on?
So we heard earlier, thank you to Betsy and Dr. Bush presenting. I did a little bit of the oral history research and the mental health. That was one of my thing, and I did the botany project with them as well. And so, yeah.
And now work as a interpreter for the village.
Yes. Yeah. So they were kind of grooming me, as I would say, So, yeah, did not know much. So now I work with the United Nations, with the UNHCR agency, and I do a few other agencies as well.
And Vung, can you tell us about what kind of projects you've worked on and what the challenges have been for you, as well as the positive points?
Yes. So, like Swin had mentioned, right? We're in these projects, in several projects that we involve with. I guess me and Swin are, in a way, Swin speak better English and I speak better Jirai. So mix us together, I guess, so we could help each other.
Good team. Yes.
A team, yeah, good team.
Yeah.
So I have involved in several projects with professors from different university. I was a student at Guilford College, and then I met Catherine, who's at Elon at that time, university, and then Dr. Suda, Dr. M with the UNCG, and then Kelsey, who's at A&T. So all the university work together with the professor. So it has been. I was grateful to be part of it. I was part of the Montagnard hypertension projects where I was the community liaison interpreter and co-researcher. I was involved in ethnobotany project where I was a cultural broker, interpreter, researcher, and I would call myself an expert because I know a lot of the plant that we talk about. I'm like, yeah, I know, but just based on the photo. And I remembered Catherine was like, are you sure that's the plant? I said, yeah, I've seen it a million times, so I know. So I would say I would call myself an expert when it comes to like identifying plants in the community. And then oral history, I was part of. I was the interpreter. This was more interesting project because I try not to be the. I'll try to be neutral, so I'm more toward the interpreter, note taker, and a co-researcher, and just listening. So yeah. So I'm in other project I'm involved, which I probably wouldn't recall. I have a few on my list.
I mean, were there aspects of going into your own community and doing interviews that you found difficult or surprising during the course of the projects? Back to you, Swin.
I guess the difficult part was retaining the information because some of the information was very hard, to take in. Like I said, at the end of the day, we're still human, and a lot of the information it affects you because you are the byproduct of the community itself. And so, but in a way, it was helpful for me to hear those informations and to hear those stories, because it was education for me too, but also for the elders to have a way for them to express themselves and how they feel. Is almost like I said, it was like a therapy session for them, to let release some of that emotions and trauma that they've been going through. So it was both healing and educational for both sides, I'd say.
Yeah, I would like to add to what Swin was saying about that their willingness to tell their story. I think, and Catherine did also mention that Dr. Bush, I'm sorry, was saying that they want to tell their story. Some people would want to like, I don't know. It depends on the person, right? Some people are like, I don't want to relive the trauma. But the people we have talked and interviewed, they've like asked us more questions. We want to tell you our story, and some of the stories are it's just very. I was just amazed and surprised, and I think the hard part of being from the community is try to stay neutral and not get too emotional. Because sometimes the story they told is just so. I wasn't there, but I could feel the trauma they went through, and then I think I remember caught telling myself not to get too emotional and not start crying because that was hard. But I think that's the surprising part is that that they willing to tell you if you ask them and if you're willing to listen. And yeah.
And you had mentioned that some of the people you interviewed were members of your own family. How did that strike you?
Oh yeah.
How was your role doing that?
Yeah, that was very hard. That was very challenging. Yeah, and my father's here in the audience. I told him to come by. So I think one of the participants was my dad, and when and I was the interpreter, or just helping, just let him tell the story, not just interpreting, but like just let him tell the story. Try to be neutral, as if he is just another participant and not part of my family, or that I know his story, because I learned so much from what he told when he's talk about his childhood experience and the trauma that he went through. I'm like, oh my God, and you're my father, but I didn't know this, so I was very thankful that he brought up the story and willing to tell his story. So yeah, so it was I had mixed emotion.
Do you have tips for other people doing oral history research in the community, either people from inside the community or outsiders? Do either of you have any suggestions for how to gain access and trust from communities that are sort of seen as marginalized or silenced? What kind of advice can you give to a room full of people interested in history and research?
I think how Dr. Bush and Betsy conducted the whole research, they did a really good job having an interpreter, because for sure need an interpreter, and have I guess one of the community members. That's always important too, and also have a specialist. That's always good because they know what the process are and how to conduct the research properly. And they have the experience and the knowledge. That is also very important, because that's what the community lacks, is that access to information, the access to resources. And so having that collaboration and partnership is very important when doing a research like this. The same thing as business. Having a good business partner is always important at the end of the day for you to do what you need to do. And so, yeah.
Thank you. How about you?
I would like to highlight the trust part, because building trust is very important before you can start and do anything with the community, right? So for example, Betsy, who worked with the Women's Learning Group, and I've seen her how she interact with the woman. I was part of the Women's Learning Group as well, and she's learned Jarai, and that's take dedication, right? To work with a group of people, learn their language. And for Catherine, she would bring food, or just be part of the community, and earn their trust and build that trust. And another tip to work with a community is, we as researchers, like, what can we bring or give back to the community? And I think that's very important, right? For their time, compensation. I think with Dr. Suda and Dr. S, we talk about, like gift cards for the people who have participated in the research. And the oral history, share their story. If they wanted to be shared, want their story to be shared. And we had a video that I think I was part of it. It just so interesting. I'm like, it was like 10 years ago, and I'm like, I remember going to the lake that we went to, and recreated this scene where the woman in the video, who was like, got so excited just to be I think relive that life again. So it just it was very amazing just to be part of that experience. And yeah, so what researcher can offer the community. And then I also want to mention too, so during my undergrad, when I did the ethnobotany, I created a booklet, plant booklets, some in Jurai and in English, and that booklet was printed out and given to the woman, who then learn, when they were like learning English and also see the plant that from the garden and learning some English as well as Jurai. So that was my giving, because I did the interview and then went to their garden. So now my giving back is that here's the booklet that you can use to share with your children or your family. So.
Yeah, sorry, just to go off of that, I think at the end of the day, we're all researchers here in this room. And, before doing research, we have to be open-minded and have a different perspective in how we look at the assignments, because what our hypothesis may never be what the actual hypothesis is once you finish the research. So at the end of the day, it's have an open mind when you're going out there into the community. And then, one of my favorite quote by Martin Luther King, like the ultimate question in life is, what is your purpose? How can you affect others? And so we're all community organizers or community leaders here. And so you should ask yourself the question, what are you doing for another person? So.
And just really quickly, I'd asked you if you had any dream sort of projects of your own, if you were to design and manage your own oral history projects. If you don't have any ideas, that's fine, but I did want to ask if you, what would you do? What kind of project, would you do anything differently? And what topics would you choose and how would you carry it out?
Yeah, for me personally, because I work with Montagnard populations and community members, but I also work in the resettlement agency where I come across all refugees. So for me, maybe I love hearing story how they got to America. Like their journey, their trauma, their positive, the challenges, just everything. Because I have my own story how I got here, but I would like to hear others as well. I think that would be very interesting. And just a reminder, June 20th is Refugee Day. So if you're in the community, look up I think we have World Refugee Day celebration here in Greensboro, as well as everywhere else. Church World Service, which I'm part of, a program officer for community and engagement. We have a resource created, just top five ways to involve during World Refugee Day, and I can share that it could be through email. Maybe if you leave your email, I can share that with you all, and you can share with others, right? To just celebrate the World Refugee Days. It's not just about the Montagnard, but everyone who come to this country and find this as their new home. And so.
Thank you, guys. That's really useful. How about a round of applause?
My name is Zhihong Chen. I teach history at Guilford College. During my time at Guilford, I had the honor to collaborate with Andrew Yang on several projects, one of which was co-teaching a course on Asian American history and politics. According to Andrew, this was the first and perhaps still the only college-level course focusing on Asian American history. I'm open to corrections. And then I'm going to quickly report to you that experience and reflections. And then I want to briefly talk about new things I've done in the spring semester this year and future things I hope to do, all in the hope of promoting awareness of the low-income and refugee communities issues. So why did I decide to create a new course? This was not my really main expertise. I teach history, but I wasn't very familiar with Asian American history. Well, you all know there is the anti-Asian hate under COVID. 2020, with the tragedy of George Floyd, And we learned that one of the 4 policemen was actually an Asian American. So this posed questions to everyone. What's next, right? What was the relationship between the Asian Americans and African Americans? And how could we maybe collaborate in future endeavors? Again, I worked with Andrew Young, and I was one of the instructors, but Andrew was invited as a co-instructor and co-educator. So we were also lucky to have 2 TAs, Guilford students. One is Riri, some of you might know her. Another is Nima Lama. This course is unconventional in the sense that from the very beginning, we decided to spend at least half of the class time focusing on having conversations with Asian American community members. So the class met twice a week, but we devoted one class time to having conversations with community members. We taught the course twice. The first time was in fall 2020. We remember that year, right? Election year, but also that's the first year of COVID. The second time we taught it was in spring 2022. Over the course of these 2 times of teaching, we were able to talk and connect with about 30 community members from diverse backgrounds. So next I'm going to very quickly go over the community members we were able to talk during the course. See whether you can recognize some of them. Konga, Ricky, Haya, Zhihong, both Guilford College students, Hadith, Jerry. So I'm not going to read their names. See whether you can recognize them. I'm sure some of them are in the audience today. The TA in the second round was Jess. So a very impressive list of guests. Feel very honored. And as part of the course design, we came up with interesting topic hooks so that students felt that the questions were relevant to their experience today. So those are some of the examples. We also trained students in terms of intercultural competency and oral interview skills. I want to say that the experience was very successful. We got wonderful student evaluations. And almost unanimously, they said that one of the most memorable experiences in the class was to have the opportunity to talk with community members. So that's highly impactful. It's also very beautiful to see the empowerment of the community members who talked with us. By being a part of the class, in some way, some of the community guests learned a little bit about the history, maybe of their history of their own refugee community, and felt less isolated and less alone in the process. They had a deeper understanding of why they had become refugees in the first place. And we witnessed the empowerment of some of the young people, including the TAs in the class. So it's very beautiful to witness. So I'm going to be very quick to have a very brief mentioning of something new I've done. In spring of this year, I co-taught another class, a course sequence. It's 2 classes, focusing on refugees in Greensboro, but also the Tibetan refugees in India. So one of the main projects in the course sequence was, again, doing oral interviews and constructing story maps. The student works were uploaded. It's still under construction, but we have constructed a public website where we hoped to preserve the story maps and oral histories. It's called Refugee Narratives. So you go to the different tabs. The story maps, I want to pull out the ones students have done in Greensboro. Again, you might see some familiar names here. If you click any of them, it will lead you to the story maps. It's a combination of some images and narratives. For example, this is the story map on Razaz Ahmad. So you see some narratives combined with maps in Dharamshala, images. The ones that students did in Dharamshala, India, are still being uploaded. So eventually the website will be public. So last word, in the future, hopefully next year, I'm designing a new course, the connection between Asian Americans and African Americans, interwoven history, and there is also a need for solidarity. I won't have time to go over some of the highlight moments in the past. In terms of the course design and collaborations we could have in the future. I think my time is up. Yeah. Yes. Good. Thank you.
Maps are so important, especially for diasporic communities, refugee communities, to know where you've been and where you're going, and for others to know about your journey as well. And I want to talk about a specific experience that I had when I was working and living in Cambodia, the province there, remote part. I was invited to go back up to Ratanakiri, to the center of the province there, remote part of Cambodia, bordering the central highlands of Vietnam. It was December 29, 2000. It's a long time ago. But I joined 1,000 Indigenous people from the Krum group, and they, all 1,000 of them were in a forest clearing, and they were playing the gongs and dancing to welcome representatives from the Phnom Penh government who had flown in helicopters to meet them. An agreement with government that set up a 5,000 hectare community forest that was managed and protected by the indigenous people themselves, by the Krum themselves. They had, some years previously, formed an association to protect their forest, and they made up guidelines and rules and regulations because they knew that for them, life, we have to protect this. Land, forest is life. We have to protect this. We can't have it disappear. And so what was happening that day in December 2000 was the government was officially recognizing their community forestry association, and there's part of Cambodian law recognizes the rights of communities to do this with their forests. How did this happen? I mean, we're talking about marginalized people in the middle of a remote province. They're looked down upon by ethnic Khmer often. How did they get this agreement? And for that, we have to go back just a couple of years previously, where these communities had come into a conflict with a logging company from Taiwan, Hero Logging Company. And that company got approval from the government to take 60,000 hectares of land in this district where the Krum were living, and clear cut it and to grow, I think they were going to grow rubber. The villagers had no idea this was happening. They didn't know anything about it. So suddenly, the trees are falling, bulldozers are coming in, and they were very upset because for them, the forests are important for their livelihood. They, not necessarily for the logging business, but for all the things you can collect in a forest, like bamboo, to build your house, rattan, medicine herbs, mushrooms, some hunting as well, fishing. So they were very upset about company invading their land, not just because of the collection forests, but because of spirit forests. The Krum had traditional beliefs, important areas in the forest or on the mountains, or certain rivers that hold profound spiritual power. And you have to respect those spirits. You don't just come in with a bulldozer and mow everything down, chop, chop. So they were starting to fight with company. They confiscated a bulldozer. There was conflict happening. And fortunately, there was a part of the Taiwan company management agreement that said they could not clear areas of cultural significance to local people. So that's where I was. So that's where I was asked to come in as a researcher to work with the community to specifically identify where their spirit forests were. People didn't have these phones with GPS, and my husband, who's a geographer, he had some of these GPS clunky machines, and so we worked with the local people, and they learned how to take the waypoints for their different spirit forests and their collection forests. But equally importantly, we sat around with them at night and collected the stories of the spirit forests. One was named Phnom Ling Ling, and another one was called Phnom Gong, And in Phnom Gong, you might see this happening if you violate the taboos, the regulations. So those two aspects, the data points, the maps are power, were really key. And the way we got the maps, we just be in the village, usually at night, people back from the field, and just drawing, on a piece of paper where Phnom Ling Ling is around here. Well, this is where Phnom Ling Ling is around here, and this is our village, and we used to be here, now we're here. Very complicated. But we collected the information, and then we had a workshop in the province so they could correct the information or, and come up with their ideas, what should be done about this logging company. We were fortunate, they were fortunate. Because they made their voices loud, the province supported this mapping of their spirit forests by a mixed group. It was villagers, there was me, there was people from Ministry of Environment, there were other community members there. So it had the support of the UN, human rights, lots of different players supported this. Just the maps themselves are pretty impressive. I mean, it goes through various renderings, but this is, it's a few later, but you sort of drawing on the ground. My husband walked in the woods. I did too, to say, okay, this is where this forest ends and this one starts, and so they had been successful in this effort. This, not like this, this. So result was that they were a well-organized community, and they proceeded to get the authorization to control their own, not just spirit forests, but all the forests. So that was what? Almost a quarter century ago. Okay. So was it sustainable? This is my night, I'm thinking, I shouldn't speak about this because it probably all fell apart, who knows? And whatever happened. And so I called up my old friend in Ratanakiri, Gordon, who has lived there for 30 years. I said, Gordon, whatever happened to the spirit forest? And he, what's happened in the last 25 years has been an explosion of large agribusiness going into Ratanakiri, just clearing land, unstoppable almost. What he said, was really amazing. He said, yeah, it's very difficult here still, even more so than when 20 years ago. But those spirit forests and the community forests are relatively intact. There's been some grabbing of trees here and there, but for the most part, because the community was organized for a long time before they even got official permission, they continued to protect their forest. And he said that that particular studies, he said it was seminal, he uses word like it spearheaded what came in the next couple of years, which was a new land law in Cambodia, 2001, that recognized the rights of Indigenous people to communal ownership of their land, meaning not just my house and my yard, but meaning the whole village together, you own it together, plus where you do your jamka, your swidden, plus where you have your cemetery, your sacred forest. It can all be mapped out, and Indigenous communities can get title of hands. So that in the Zhihong, Cambodia, Lao area, problem, of course, is always implementation. So I think that's about it for what I wanted to present. But I do really encourage everyone to get into mapping. I want to learn story maps. Thank you so much.
A longtime friend and colleague of Andrew Young, and I'm retired now, 3 years into retirement. I've almost forgot the number, which is a sign that
It's working.
It's working, yeah. So, in listening to the presentations and just generally being in this room, there's so much knowledge in here. I just want to thank all of you for all the learning today. Gracious, it's like a lot, and it's very intriguing. So I want to be very brief and just say some things I picked up from the presentations. I'll start with a question. Raise your hand if you know the name Walter Ong. I'm going to raise them high if you know Walter Ong. Okay, I got to do one old school teaching thing. I just have to do this. Am I still on the mic? Just have to do this. Okay, so if you don't remember anything. Okay, so Walter Ong is a historical linguist. And he had this exotic theory, right, that what's happening in culture like right now, right this very minute, just to bring it up to the now, is that we're shifting from we went through a long period of human history, like many, many centuries, eons, of organizing our world around oral culture. So he does this wonderful service of establishing that as the baseline. That's the norm. That's the human norm. Then we went through a brief period where we became so infatuated with literacy, with writing, that writing became the preeminent thing. And so what Ong is saying, bringing it back to the present moment, is through, I don't have my phone's back there, but through the wonders of digital media, we are now in a period, we've reintroduced orality. So what we're arguably seeing when we get students that will tell you about their course evaluations, the part they liked was the conversation part, or the glory of sitting with elders and talking, those should be ringing a bell for us, a very deep human bell that says that's really our root. And so there's this odd kind of juxtaposition really of contemporary media returning us back to an oral, what Ong called secondary orality. So that's mainly what I wanted to share for what it's worth, to try to think about what what the world looks like to our students. You know, I'm no longer a teacher. I taught for 15 years at the UNC School of the Arts here down the road in Winston-Salem. So to do that kind of baseline thinking, what's going on here, that's kind of what I'm interested in. So I am fascinated by interviews. I think they're one of the richest things you can do in teaching. I've even had students interview their own parents. You know, we had one example of that. You know, that can be done. But anyway, yeah, sorry for rattling on there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Zoe Van Buren. I'm the Folklife Director at the North Carolina Arts Council. And my work is completely grounded in intergenerational transmission and education. So there was so much from this presentation this whole day that has really stuck with me. But just a couple reflections. One is that oral history is not just fact-finding. It's a profound interpersonal encounter for both the speaker and the interviewer. I was particularly moved by the two presenters in the first portion of this session. And the social change that's possible from oral history flows both from the importance of filling in gaps and silences in the archive, but also from the process and what that brings to us as humans encountering each other and learning from each other. So I'm thinking about process and product as sort of core values of oral history. And in that process part, how we conduct oral history is incredibly important to its outcomes. We use terminology like trauma-informed ethnography or trauma-informed oral history sometimes. And I was reminded by the student interviewers that we have to care for the mental health of interviewers and of community researchers as much as we care for the experience of the speakers who might be revisiting difficult memories, but that at the end of the day, when we feel cared for, we want to tell our stories. And we can have deeply transformative moments of intergenerational understanding of like, oh, this is why I was raised this way. This is why my father was the way he was growing up, or my mother was the way she was growing up. And then finally, I'm really struck by the need for structures to organize, prepare, and archive materials that come from community-generated research. I was involved with a community scholars workshop program out in Cherokee recently, and our advisory group said, look, yes, we've been documented by people from the outside, but we've also been documenting ourselves a lot and doing a lot of our own research. But all of that is just vanishing into the ether too, and nobody knows where it is. Is it in this library, or is it with this museum, or did it die on this person's laptop when they, lost it at the airport? And so the importance of accessible archives is coming out of this conversation for me. And I was particularly struck by the moment in your presentation with Betsy where you said we built this archive and we gave it to Liana. MDA has it, we know the community can find it there. And how fortunate we are to have organizations like MDA that can play that role, and how many more communities need that. And just a personal kind of reminder for myself and my own work of the need for technical training in communities to do this work themselves. Just the basics, the hands-on, how to turn on your audio recorder and make sure you're going to get a good file out of it, and how to comport yourself ethically in an interview. And handle your materials responsibly afterward. It's really important work. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Now, before I even introduce myself, but when I sent that to Liana just like 2 days ago, she successfully opened it. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, I cannot have this on my computer alone. Yeah. I am Kat Bush. I am a botanist. I'm an evolutionary biologist. I'm a phylogeneticist. I shouldn't be here. I have never been trained to do any of this. And so we started with ethnobotany, and then we basically were hearing such crazy stories in the gardens that Betsy and I were like, yeah, Betsy! Betsy was the one that knew what she was doing. I love how Swin said that I knew what we were doing. We did not. Yeah. So Betsy knew what she was doing, and we did the oral history. Linked to that, we had we just followed the community and what they needed. At one point, the elders were serving us, and they had this plant that they were eating a lot of, And I was like, this is one point when botany can come in handy. This is toxic, I think. I don't think they should be eating this. The Montagnards are amazing botanists. It was completely dead on related to something in Vietnam that was edible. This species was not. And so we ran the toxicology studies on it. We told the community, Isu never really stopped eating it. He said, I'm fine. I was like, you really gotta stop eating this. Like, but I'm awesome. Just pour off the first boiling. And then we went into mental health. And again, I wasn't trained in doing this, but there was nobody else to do this. And one of the last take-home messages here is that I think over a decade, what I have learned is I have started to blend into the background. So in the beginning, I only knew to do things, and now by the end, when we did mental health, Swim was the one that was doing most of the things. Swim was leading the mental health seminars. I was helping, working in the background and how to do it. I did the first one. I was like, all right, take that to North Carolina now, and so, because I'm not part of the community, I feel now that my job is to help with the privilege I have, the education I have, is to pass this on to these young community members. They are perfectly capable of taking it. And so in essence, it should be to them at this point. That's the whole point, that we fade out and they step in.
Hi, my name is Ayla Amon. I am an Islamic art historian by training. I am also a trauma-informed yoga instructor for the Yoga Connection here in Greensboro. We provide free yoga for immigrant, refugee, and displaced women in Greensboro and Guilford County. But I'm here for my role as curator of collections at the Greensboro History Museum. I wrote my remarks, or else I'll just prattle on. So I am someone who works kind of at the intersection of history, and public services. And as many of you know, and has been pointed out, for a long time in the academic field of history, data like oral histories, origin stories, folklores, communal memories have been either unused or in the extreme discredited as unreliable sources in the field of history, often grounded in larger social and political movements like racisms, colonialisms, imperialisms, sexisms, and religious discriminations. But what this, at the end of the day, has served to accomplish for someone in my profession is that there is a dearth of these narratives being told in public spaces like museums. And this is really compounded that given we in the museum field place this primacy on objects, and these are the very things that are often very hard for diasporic groups of immigrant, refugee, and displaced persons to bring with them for a number of reasons, or they are the most closely held onto and passed down through generations for a great number of reasons. But this means that we as museums have fewer ways to do our traditional presentation of these communities in permanent and visible ways. So my challenge then is, how can we in the museum take these really rich narratives, especially those of individual memory, because we don't want one person's experiences to make claims or speak for an entire group, and contextualize them in larger historical narratives that we present? How can I make sure that groups are not only represented as trauma or through their traumas or displacements? How can we put these histories and their objects on display in a way that does not repeat those ethnographic and othering formats of past museum presentations? And how can we integrate these long stories and histories of people and their groups into our exhibitions if that maybe doesn't fit our museum mission? But I think most pertinent through what I'm hearing here and for this conference is that how can I get community trust and consent for the work that I do in the museum space? So I'm hoping to find ways to create spaces of safe expression to tell me when I inevitably get things wrong. One of collaboration in both presentation and ownership and storage displays, and one of language plurality. So most museums are only presented in English, so doing things in multiple languages is extraordinarily important to me, because I want people to truly see and experience themselves not only in my museum, the places that I work, but also as part of the city's history. So I think that working towards creative integration of these oral histories and out-of-the-box thinking of what is a representative collection of a group or a people is something that I am really working toward at the Greensboro History Museum. And I'm very open if any of you would like to contact me or come to the museum and speak about how we can bring your community in. So thank you.
Sounds great. Put your number up on that. Thank you so much.